Did everyone see this? You know what this is about? And ultimately what the whole Torture Poets Department album is about? This is about the longest toxic relationship Taylor Swift has ever had, the one she has with the public. It's ultimately not about Joe Alwyn or Maddie Healy or any of the other people who have hurt her and she writes about. This is why I said mentions of Maddie on the album were really just references to something else. And that something else is the symbiotic and often contentious relationship between Taylor's art and personal life, and the fine line where her connection with her fans crosses over to their exploitation of her. After the album came out, I remember saying to my friend, I'm so glad Taylor has her music to channel all her emotions into, because otherwise she would be having a very public mental breakdown. Because to me, this album is the artistic expression of this moment, when Britney Spears shaved her head and attacked a paparazzi car with an umbrella in 2007. The emotions behind this moment with Britney are not so different from the emotions behind the songs on the Torture Poets album. Let me explain with a little backstory about what happened with Britney so we can talk about how it's related to Taylor. In 2006, Britney Spears gave birth to her second son. 2 months later, she's going through her divorce with Kevin Federline. 2 months after that, her aunt Sandra, who's like a second mother to her, dies of cancer. And this whole time, Britney was also dealing with Kevin using the tabloids to portray her as an unfit parent, trying to take the kids away from her. She wrote about this in her memoir, how Kevin would take the kids to spend time with them, but then wouldn't bring them back. He would prevent Britney from seeing them for weeks at a time. Now, I don't care what you think of Britney, but as a person, as a mom, the idea of a man keeping a woman away from her babies months after she's just given birth is simply cruel. I think any parent could relate to that kind of agony. When this head-shaving umbrella moment happened, Britney hadn't been able to see her kids for weeks. Earlier that same day, she had gone to Kevin's house and begged to see the kids, and he had refused to let her in. She said in the memoir that she was completely beside herself with grief, a grief that was compounded by, quote, severe postpartum depression, abandonment by my husband, the torture of being separated from my 2 babies, the death of my adored Aunt Sandra, and the constant drumbeat of pressure from paparazzi. That night, she shaved her head. Britney writes in her memoir, nobody seemed to understand that I was simply out of my mind with grief. Now, is this not the same sentiment that Taylor writes about in the song How Did It End? Britney writes, all I had known my whole life was being exposed on every level. Every part of normal life had been stripped from me, going out in public without becoming a headline, making normal mistakes, feeling like I could trust the people around me. I had no freedom and yet also no security. Is this not the same cage that Taylor writes about in But Daddy, I Love Him? Is this not the same circus life or asylum Taylor refers to in Who's Afraid of Little Old Me? Britney writes, on the inside, I felt a cloud of darkness for a long time. On the outside, though, I tried to keep looking the way people wanted me to, keep acting the way they wanted me to. Sweet and pretty all the time. Is this not what Taylor alludes to in I Can Do It With a Broken Heart? Is this not the same long-suffering propriety that she mentions in Guilty as Sin? Finally, Britney writes, but the veneer had been so worn away by this point that there was nothing left. I was a raw nerve. Shaving my head was a way of saying to the world, fuck you. In the song Guilty as Sin, Taylor talks about how even if she does the quote-unquote right things, they're gonna crucify me anyway. So why not just do what she wants to do? So in a way, her rebound relationship with Maddie was kind of her way of saying fuck you to the world. And she quite literally says this in other songs on the album. Just like Britney's decision to shave her head, Taylor's decision to date Maddie, or Travis for that matter, was her way of giving the middle finger to a world that continues to judge and condemn her for her own life choices, how she chooses to grieve the end of her relationship, and how and with whom she chooses to move on. So the album, The Torture Poets Department, and whatever female rage the musical becomes, is Taylor screaming at the world, I am a real human being. I am a real person with real feelings going through very real things.